Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Crawford. Today we're going to go over Unit 1.3, Day 1, Introduction to Transformations. Now we're going to focus on rotations, reflections, and translations, which are words that should be familiar to you. Either you've learned it in middle school maybe, or just might have heard those words in general. So we're going to talk about a bit more specific definitions with those today and what they would look like when we're using them in math class. So first of all, transformation is really just a general name for all three of these things. Anytime you transform something, it means you change it. So mathematically, when we're talking about a graph, it means we take points in the plane as input. So we give a transformation points, and it transforms it into something as a different output. So if I give a transformation the point 1, 2, and it's a translation, it's going to move those points, or it might reflect them or rotate them, so it's changing it somehow. The first one we're going to talk about is translation. Now, the key word we want you guys to think of with translation is the word slide. Translation means you slide a figure a distance horizontally and or vertically. Remember, horizontally is either left or right, so you might even want to draw those in. And then vertically is either up or down. So it's just moving the shape on a plane. You're not changing the size. You're not changing the shape of it. All you're doing is moving it across the plane or across the graph. I'm going to show you a quick demonstration of that too. Let's see if it'll let me click on it. There we go. So there's a video representation of it moving. And you can see if I drag it around, I can move it up and down, I can move it left and right, but notice this shape is exactly the same size as the original shape. I'm not changing the distance between the points, I'm just changing where it's at in the picture. So that's why we say, think of the word slide with that, because that will help you to remember it. Okay. The next one we're going to talk about is reflection. Now think of like a mirror. When you see your reflection in the mirror, everything's a little bit backwards because it's been flipped. So your picture that you see in the mirror is actually the opposite of what everybody else sees because it's flipped. So think of reflection, think of the word flip. When we flip it across a specific line, in the direction perpendicular to the line of reflection. That's just kind of a fancy way of saying we flip the figure across the line. And so make sure you copy that down on your notes page. But again, those keywords, translation is slide, reflection is flip, and we'll look at a quick demonstration of that as well. So same picture. So here's our line of reflection. And then here is our original picture, and here's the reflection. So you can see it's flipped over backwards. And if I was to change it, the picture across would follow as well, because it's a mirror image. So just like we normally see in real life, mirror image, think of reflection. And this line of reflection is extremely important because every point should be the same distance away. So if you look at this point, it's the same distance away as its reflected point. Same thing with C and same thing with A. So same distance across. Okay, let me find my slide again. The last one we're going to talk about today is rotation. And that's probably the most common one you guys have heard. The thing to think about with that is the word turn. So when we rotate something, we're turning it by moving it about a point along an arc through a specific angle. So that sounds really, really complicated and crazy. All that's really saying is when you rotate something, you do it about a point. So there's a point like in the middle that you would rotate it around, and you're doing it through a specific angle. So maybe 45 degrees or 90 degrees. That'd be like a quarter turn. But you're moving it around a certain point and about a certain distance. So let's take a look at what that looks like with the same picture. So there's our original, that green one, and then the yellow is the new one. So if I rotate it, that point in the center, that C, that's your point of rotation. So notice I'm rotating it around and it's always going to be the same distance away from that one point. I'm just changing the direction. So this would be like 90 degrees, this would be 180, and then 270, and 360 degrees would bring us back to where we started. But notice I'm turning around that point by doing that. So make sure you get those copied down. Those should be, or there should be spots for that on your notes page. The next thing we're going to talk about is knowing which one's the original and which one's the transformed image. So when you see the prefix pre, that usually means before or first, and that's the case here as well. Let's see if this will let me move. Come on. Click. There we go. Sometimes it's a little cranky and doesn't want to move on the screen. So the pre-image is the original image. It's what you start with. Before it's rotated, before it's reflected, before it's translated, it's the pre-image. And again, think of pre means before the first. And then image obviously would be the figure after the transformation. And notice all of the pre-image letters are just irregular letters. So A, B, or C. And then when we transform it, we have this little apostrophe mark, which is actually pronounced as A prime. That's how you say this. You don't say A apostrophe. It's not the number 1. It's not A dash. It's A prime. So make sure you say it appropriately so that you sound like you know what you're talking about, because you don't want to sound silly when you're talking about this stuff. You want to sound like you know what you're doing. You sound intelligent when you're doing your material. So make sure you copy that down. Something to help you guys remember that, because a lot of people kind of get this mixed up. They forget which one is A and which one's A prime. We want you guys to think of Transformers. So if you guys have seen the Transformer movie, you might recognize this character. This is Optimus Prime. So the Transformers, when we start the movies, usually we see them as the semi-trucks or the sports car or whatever it might be. They start as that, and when they transform, then they become a prime. So think of that with our lesson as well. In order to remember which one comes after the transformation, think of like Optimus Prime. He's a semi-truck, and then he becomes Optimus Prime after he transforms. So try and remember that, or try to use that to kind of help you have a way to remember that a little bit better, because sometimes it can be a little tricky. There's also a song that we've got that goes with it as well. We'll post that along with this video. For those of you especially that like to have some auditory stuff or some music to go with your lesson, that might help you remember some of the things as well. Alright, so a couple more things with our 3 different types. In a translation, every point is moved the same distance in the same direction. So if I'm translating up 5 units, every single point has to go up 5 units. I can't just have half of them moving or some of them moving in different directions. Same thing with reflection. When I flip it, everything is getting flipped over a line of symmetry. Now remember, symmetry means same thing on both sides. So think of that picture we showed with the triangle flipping across and making the mirror image. And then rotation, it's going to be around a single point. So we kind of saw all those things in the video, but I do want to show that again. So if we've got this little demonstration for translation, remember we said slide is the word to think of with that. So if I tap on this, you see it move across the screen. It's not turning, it's not flipping, it's just literally sliding across the screen. If we look at reflection, remember our word for that was flip. So when I tap on the image, it should flip back and forth. It's the opposite. He's facing this direction this time, and when I reflect it, shouldn't have moved it, but when I flip it, he looks the other direction. It's just to flip across a line. And then rotate means to turn. So this is going to spin around that middle point. That would be the rotation part. Okay, so now we're just going to do some basic naming of the 3 types. So I want you guys to pause here real quick. If you haven't done so already, name which type is which. Which one of these pictures is rotation, which one is reflection, and which one's translation. And then hit play and you can see the answers. So go ahead and pause here. All right. So in the first one, you can see it's got this arrow going this way. Hopefully you wrote down that that's a rotation. It's turning about point P in the middle there. The second one, it's just moving down a couple units, so that would be a translation. And then the last one, it's flipping across this line of symmetry, which means it's a reflection. So there are 3 different types right there. Okay, same thing here, only this time we're doing it on a graph. Now remember, these little apostrophe marks are not the number 1. They're pronounced as prime. So this is R prime. This is Q, this is Q prime. This is S prime. So if it's moving, looks like it's going 2 to the right and 2 up. Well, what is that? Is it translating? Is it reflecting? Is it rotating? And if you look at it, it looks like it's just sliding across the graph. So that means it should be a translation. It's not facing a different direction. It's not a different size. It's exactly the same shape and size, just moved across the graph. That's a translation. If you look at this one, is this facing the same direction in the new prime version? No. This letter E was pointing up to the top before, and it's definitely turned a different way. So it can't be a translation. Is it flipped across a line? Like if I draw a line down the middle here, are these mirror images of each other? No, not really. So that means it's probably going to be a rotation. It's turned about the middle, so it's turning a totally different direction than we originally were looking at. Okay, and then last one. If you look at this one again, this is not facing the same direction as this was. The X was on the left-hand side before. Now it's on the right-hand side, so it can't be a translation. If I was to draw a line right down the middle of them, does it look like a mirror image across the line? Yeah, I'd say so. X is the same distance on both sides. W is 4 units away, and so is V. So this is a reflection. It's reflected across that middle line. Reflection. All right, so the remaining problems on there are your homework. Make sure to read directions to see if they want you to name it, if there's something else that they want you to do with the problem. Feel free to rewind and check back on any parts of this video, or to pause and ask your teacher for help if you're not sure about something.